Hi everybody, it's week 4 of the Crossing the Desert series, and this week we're looking at community. And I thought I'd just show you what I do at the very beginning of each week to get ideas, and that's just to use a sketchbook, look at different Bible passages, and just consider what shapes and colours and threads and stitches might come to mind. You can see there, that was the Word of God sketch from last week. And then also I try out a few stitch ideas on samples of fabric before I begin on the main piece. And this week, as I said, it's community, and I just started using these overlapping circles just to show that, you know, we all live in different villages or different parts of the town, and we have different interests. God made us all as individuals with different characters and things that we want to pursue, but we all overlap and interconnect as a church community. But we overlap with people in our wider community as well, don't we? So that's why I use these stitches where the circles overlap and are interwoven with these different threads, and using different colours, different stitch ideas there. And I used that chain stitch on that pink one. I took that forward to be the stitch that's used as the thread from the beginning to the end of the piece as well, just to show how we are bound together. In fact, the inspiration for that came from the verse in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 3, which talks about us making every effort to stay in unity with the Holy Spirit through the bond of peace. So we really want to do that as a church family, don't we? And in Colossians 3 it talks about us bearing with one another and forgiving one another, but on top of all those virtues to put on love, which binds us together in perfect unity. And so the idea of the chain stitch and the woven threads comes from that idea of being bound together in unity and in peace. And you can see here the third stone in the cairn, which I've just used the same colour threads as in the overlapping circles, just to, I suppose, to denote our different characters, our different interests, our different nature, but yet we're all held together by our common love of God and our desire to reach other people. So I think during this week I'm hoping to do a few more of the circles, using other colours and perhaps other stitches, because as time goes on and we move forward, there's no doubt that as new shoots arise in our communities, we will have different expressions of community. That's part of the nature of Threshold, and part of our individual nature as well, isn't it? So I look forward to showing you the piece next week, and being able to show you the progress that's been made.
Thank you, Anne. Isn't that amazing? Don't know how she does it. It's really helpful. Thank you so much. I was looking at Threshold's website last night, and I pressed the About Us tab, and I arrived at the page which said what we believe. And on that page, there's a picture of a bunch of people of various ages and shapes and sizes wandering across what looks actually a bit like a fairly barren landscape, many deep in conversation with each other. And the text directly underneath on the What We Believe page mentions the word communities twice in as many sentences. So, Threshold believes in communities, yay! Specifically though, as Threshold, we believe in communities where we can make it easier for people to find God amongst them. Well, scooting back 1,000 to 1,500 before Jesus, as you do, when the Israelites were crossing the desert, having been called out of their slavery in Egypt, they not only became a nation on the move, but they became a community with a purpose. God's covenant community. God and his people made an agreement, a formal covenant, and they even sealed it with blood. Now, God's part of this covenant was that he would go with them and he'd lead them. He'd protect them powerfully and provide for them and eventually settle them in a beautiful, plentiful land of their own, a home. And there's a little prophetic verse which sums up this in the victory song that Moses and the people sing just after they've crossed the Red Sea, in fact. So actually really early on in their desert wanderings. In Exodus 15, the little verse says, "With your unfailing love, you lead the people that you have redeemed. In your might, you guide them to your sacred home." So the people, for their part, they promise that they're going to obey all the ways that God showed them will be best for them to live. The 10-point plan for happiness that Simon described for us last week, the 10 Commandments, otherwise known as. So their love for God was to be the most important thing, their total commitment to him as he lived and travelled amongst them. They were to love and honour and treat fairly those people who were in community with them. They were to welcome the stranger, to champion justice, to be hospitable and generous. And they were to observe laws about food and good health, and they were to live out their everyday lives as a community, or actually as a community of communities, in a rhythm of worship, of rest and of festival. And as they lived out their daily lives, they're on the move with God there right at the centre of everything they did. They in fact had to keep their eye very, very fixed on the constant presence of God as he showed himself in a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire, because they needed to be ready to move out again as soon as the pillar or the fire moved, or to wait for as long as it stayed put, of course. And of course, whenever they moved on, they carried with them their precious, beautifully designed and made artefacts of the Ark of their covenant with God and the tabernacle which housed it. Well, thank God for Jesus. Hebrews 10 puts it like this: "The old system under the law of Moses was only a shadow, a dim preview of the good things to come. Thank God that Jesus came and made a new covenant with his people, which of course again involved blood. Thank God that his laws are now written on our hearts and in our minds rather than on tablets of stones that we need to carry around with us. And thank God for people to travel across this strange landscape that we find ourselves currently in and on into the future. People who are passionate about building authentic communities of people and to make it easier for people to find God amongst them." Well, enough of me. Let's hear some stories from some of our co-travellers across our desert.
So, what would I consider the keys to building an authentic Christian community? As far as I see it, the first and most important is the reply that Jesus gave to the question, which is the greatest and most important commandment? His reply was this: "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." And again, to me, without this foundation, the Bible tells us that we would labour in vain. And unless our starting point is love for God, wanting his will and his way in our lives, then we risk building like the man who built on sand. It might look good, it might go up quickly, but when the storms and the troubles and the disagreements come, which they inevitably will, it'll just collapse. God asks us to put him first and to build our lives on him for good reason, so things will last. But Jesus then goes on to say, a second is equally important: love your neighbour as yourself. Community is plural, and without that love, we will again be building with poor materials. So a favourite song of mine from many years ago said, "Love the one you're with," but it's first and foremost the only way to build that will last. So if we determine to build using these two key elements, keeping, as Simon Baker would say, the main thing, we can expect God to reveal to us his effective building materials that will make community work. So for me, love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself.
Hi everyone, I've got 4 keys to creating authentic Christian community. The first one is listen. Who does God want us to be in community with? We must ask him through prayer, worship, and listening to our hearts, and also listening to the collective heartbeat together. In this way, hearing him, he will lead us. And we've also got to listen to each other as well. That's really important. The second key is love, and only love. We're all in a different place in our lives. We've all got different influences, and we've all been brought here from a different place. And none of us know what is in each other's hearts, only God. So we have to accept everyone wherever they're at. Loving them will free them to see Jesus' heart for them, and they will change from within. My experience, though, is that sometimes it feels like a lifetime of love from one person is not enough. That's why God wanted us to be in loving communities. Lots of lifetimes of love and acceptance can move even the biggest mountain. The third key, of course, is food. Whether it's a meal in our home or listening to someone on the street sharing a bag of chips with them, the most opportunities we have to share of God's good news and the community's place in his kingdom is over food. Finally, never, ever, ever give up. There is a room in heaven for all of us. He is already there preparing them. And whilst we wait, the least we can do as he places us together is to keep going. Keep praying, keep worshipping, keep loving, keep including, forgiving, sharing, and keeping Jesus at the centre.
Hi there. One of the keys to building authentic Christian community, from my perspective, is all about really getting to know people in the community and building trust and building relationship with people. That can be done through when you meet together as groups, but also making time to meet socially and also to meet more in an organic way, meeting up with people, sharing our lives with people, getting to know our everyday ordinary lives, what people's hopes, what people's dreams are, how they tick. It's also important, as well as spending just life together and doing life together, is committing to prayer together, committing to discipleship and teaching and learning together, and really how we support each other on our journey, and making sure everyone can be really released in their giftings and their life can be developed to their real potential. The other thing that's really key, I think, is making sure we're open to, in community, to welcoming people in, making them feel like they can really belong, whether that's your friends or your friends' friends, and just helping them see Christian life and experience Christian life as they journey along their exploration of what life's about. I think key in Christian community as well is making sure we keep the balance of the up, the in and the out. The up to God through prayer, worship, listening to God, spending time together and spending time individually. The in together, whether that's socially, just spending time getting to know each other, but also through discipleship, teaching, and how we learn and help each other develop. And then the out, just being mindful of what's happening, what everybody's doing in the world, and making sure we welcome people in and look at where God's working and make sure we focus on that and spend time on that as well. Really about love God and love others.
So what are the keys to building authentic Christian community? Well, the most obvious thing is to be living an authentic Christian lifestyle ourselves to the best of our abilities. And then we need to gather people around us to form a community. So how do we go about gathering people around us? Well, we've been working with Pastor John in Ghana for about 20 years now, and we've seen how he has gathered people in authentic communities, in schools, in the training centre, in the churches, in the villages. And there's 3 principles that we have observed in how he goes about gathering people. The first key is to share your lives with other people, be in community with other people. And that's something which is easier probably in the traditional African culture where they do live in big extended families. But we need to open our homes, invite people into our homes, We need to be generous with people, be informal, just be normal with other people. Encourage people to feel at home in our houses. Don't be precious about all the things that we have. The second principle is to treat everybody as an equal. Open your community to everybody. Don't be exclusive about who you want to share community with. It doesn't matter what people's background is, what their family circumstances are. We all have the same basic human needs, and remember that Jesus always championed the poor and the underdogs. The third thing is always to put other people first. Love people, even when sometimes people are difficult to love. Go out of your way to help people. Be the first to ring. Don't wait for them to ring you. If you're passing, call in for a chat. Go and see how people are. But in doing this, build up authentic friendships. Don't just befriend people out of a sense of duty. But when we're doing all these things to gather people around us, we're not doing this just to make us look like good people. As we have experienced God's love in our lives, we want other people to experience something of that, something of His love through our service to them. We want them to find Jesus for themselves. We want them to understand His generous love.
Hi everyone. Keys for building authentic Christian community in 2 minutes. Okay, well, it's a challenge. So I was thinking about the 3 distinct and different Christian communities that I've been involved in over the years, and thinking about them, there were 3 things that they have in common, I guess. So the first one was be there for God. So in my experience, God calls you, He is present with you, He is leading you into whatever new adventures He has for you within that community. So that's be there for God. Second key that's common to all of them is be there for each other. And that's about being real. It's about listening. It's about communicating well. I'm not saying that I do all this or have always done that really well, but important things. Important to forgive and to be forgiven, and to have definitely a sense of humour, to have soft hearts. So that's the second thing, being there for each other. And the third thing I think they've all had in common, although differently, has been being there for something bigger. So looking outward, not inward, and having a purpose, whether that purpose is hospitality and care and offering retreat, or whether it's looking after people with life-dominating problems, or whether it's mission to the local community. There's always been a bigger purpose. So those 3 things for me have been key. Being there for God, be there for each other, and be there for something bigger.
There's nothing better than living life in a community of people with God at the centre. It's so much more a way of life rather than a set of rules. And that's why at the moment, in this sort of press pause sort of a time, it feels so odd not having people in and out of here all the time. It feels really weird not laying up this table with big bowls of whatever, welcoming people in the door sometimes I've never met in my life before. Or even trying to keep a great big smile as I'm presented with every single one of those tiny potential plums from our new plum tree. They've been all picked off and brought into camp as a present, and I hear myself saying, how lovely! But please God, save us from slipping into the less honourable side of those Israelites on their journey. It was so much more comfy back in Egypt. You know, we had all the food we needed there. Well, at least we knew what life was going to be like then. It's sometimes quite attractive to listen to negative voices. Well, this is taking forever. You know, let's get on and let's make things happen ourselves. What's wrong with just a little golden calf every now and again? Maybe we could just bend the ground rules just a little bit. And just to be safe, why don't we collect just a little bit more manna today than we actually need? Especially when we're feeling a bit upskittled about what might be up ahead and unsure about just about any exit strategy. So God's treasured possession, his covenant people, his covenant community crossing the desert with Moses, they weren't always the very best model of obedient, sold out followers of their God. When Pete spoke at Threshold in February, it was part 2 of his Leaving Babylon talks. He encouraged us to wait on God until we heard or saw the signal to move, is how he described it. He said we need to boldly take the next steps out across the desert on our way to a new future with others and to cooperate with God. Well, we've certainly had our signal to move, haven't we? And to leave behind our familiar landscapes. Talking about community during that talk, Pete said, we're called away to a new way of being together that's about life, not ritual, community, not just attendance at events. It should be heart, home and hospitality, as Roy Searle says. It's about belonging to each other in God, a place to be with others and do life with them, centred around Jesus. It's not primarily about ritual, hierarchy, structures, regulations or policies. Our life together will be both domestic and public and includes all ages. In this season, I think, says Pete, we're to be shaped more by the monastic than the congregational. And then speaking about community, he continues, all these things in proper measure are there to serve the purpose of our being together. And that's the coming of God's kingdom. Well, that's another whole subject in itself. Now, Adam gave us a brilliant sneak preview of the whole of that area on Thursday, the 7th of May in the Morning Bell, so do check that out. But I'm afraid the coming of God's kingdom, you're going to have to wait another 3 weeks to hear about on a Sunday morning. See you before then, though. Bye.